People always ask me when I knew I wanted to change education. They expect some story about inspiration, about believing in students, about making a difference. I never know what to tell them. The truth is, I built a multi-million-dollar educational technology company because someone tried to destroy me. And it took me 23 years to understand what she'd actually done. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I grew up in a small town in northern Michigan, the kind of place where winter lasts 7 months, where the main employer is a paper mill that's been downsizing since the 80s, where your entire future is mapped out by the time you're 16. My father was a machinist at the mill. My mother worked part-time at the public library. We weren't poor, but money was always present in conversations, always a factor in decisions. I was good at school, not exceptional, not the valedictorian, but consistently solid. I could focus on a problem until I cracked it. I could read something carefully and retain it. My teachers appreciated me because I was quiet, diligent, and never caused disruption. I didn't draw attention to myself. That was intentional, actually. In a small town, standing out meant becoming a target. Better to be competent and invisible than brilliant and resented. My high school guidance counselor, a woman named Jessica Price, who'd been in that role for 20 years and seemed tired of it, told me I should consider the local community college. It's practical, she said. You could get an associate's degree, maybe work in business administration somewhere. Nothing wrong with a steady job. I remember sitting in her cramped office, looking at the outdated college brochures in the rack on her wall, thinking, she's already decided what I'm capable of. She's already put a ceiling on my life. But my physics teacher, a man named Howard Cooper, who'd actually worked as an engineer before retiring into teaching, pulled me aside one afternoon. "You're applying to real universities, right?" he said. "You're too good for just staying local." I told him I'd been thinking about it. "Stop thinking," he said. "Apply. You'll regret it if you don't." I applied to 9 schools, got into 6, chose a solid state university about 5 hours from home, far enough to feel like escape, close enough that I could drive back if necessary. The acceptance letter arrived in March of my senior year, and I remember my mother holding it like it was something fragile, my father nodding slowly, saying, "Good, that's good." I was going to study business, not because I loved it, but because it seemed practical, employable, safe. I wanted to build something stable for myself. The university had 18,000 students. The campus was sprawling, modern buildings mixed with older brick structures, libraries that were open 24 hours, resources I'd never imagined. I felt simultaneously excited and terrified. I worked constantly that first year. Library shifts, food service in the dining hall, weekend janitorial work in the academic buildings. I sent money home monthly. My parents never asked for it, but I knew things were tight. The mill had cut another shift. My mother's hours at the library had been reduced. I wanted to help carry the weight. My grades were strong, 3.6 first semester, 3.8 second semester. I found a rhythm. Early mornings studying, classes until mid-afternoon, work until 10, more studying until midnight. I didn't socialize. I didn't join organizations. I didn't have bandwidth for friendship. The isolation didn't bother me. It felt productive. I was building toward something. By sophomore year, I'd refined my focus. I wanted to understand how organizations worked, how systems functioned, how to identify inefficiencies and create value. I took courses in organizational behavior, economics, statistics, information systems. I wasn't passionate about any of it, but I was good at it. I could see patterns. I could analyze problems methodically. That was the year I met Professor Deborah Hill. She taught educational leadership and policy, a course that fulfilled a requirement in the business school's management track. It wasn't about teaching, It was about understanding how educational institutions operated as complex organizations, how policy decisions affected outcomes, how to measure effectiveness. Everyone said she was brilliant, published extensively, consulted for state education departments, sat on national boards. She'd written 3 books. She had connections everywhere, foundations, think tanks, government agencies. She was probably 50, always impeccably dressed, the kind of presence that commanded immediate respect. She spoke with absolute certainty, as if every statement had been thoroughly researched and verified before being voiced. The first day of class, she told us that most organizational leaders failed because they couldn't see systems clearly. You have to understand how every piece connects, she said. If you're only looking at your own department, your own metrics, your own goals, you'll miss what actually drives outcomes. I wrote that down. It seemed important. I worked hard in her class. I read every case study thoroughly. I contributed to discussions carefully, enough to demonstrate engagement, not so much that I appeared desperate for recognition. I turned in papers early. I stayed after class once to ask about a research methodology she'd referenced, and she actually seemed pleased, told me it was a sophisticated question. You're analytical, she said. Most students just want the answer. You want to understand the process. I felt validated in a way I hadn't experienced before. By the end of that semester, I had an A- in her class. She wrote on my final paper, "Excellent analytical work. You have strong potential in organizational strategy." I kept that paper in my files for years. Junior year, I took another course with her. Advanced topics in organizational systems. Smaller enrollment, more seminar style, more direct interaction. She learned our names, asked about our career plans, gave advice on internships and graduate programs. I was doing well overall. 3.85 GPA. Strong performance in my business courses. I'd secured a summer internship at a consulting firm. Nothing prestigious, but real experience analyzing business processes for small companies. Everything seemed aligned. That spring, Professor Hill asked me to come to her office. She had a corner space on the 4th floor, windows overlooking the campus quad, shelves lined with academic journals and industry awards. I sat across from her desk, uncertain why she'd requested the meeting. "I wanted to discuss your post-graduation plans," she said. I told her I was hoping to get hired at a consulting firm, maybe something focused on education or nonprofit management, where I could apply analytical skills to mission-driven work. "Have you considered graduate school?" she asked. I hadn't seriously. Graduate school meant debt, meant delaying income, meant years more of barely scraping by while my parents aged and struggled. "You should think about it," she said. "With the right MBA or master's in public policy, with the right network, you could move beyond entry-level consulting. You could actually shape organizations, influence real decisions." She paused, adjusted the papers on her desk. "I serve on advisory committees for several top graduate programs," she said. "If you're interested, I could write you a recommendation, a strong one." My heart rate accelerated. This felt significant. Someone with real influence was offering to open doors. "I would be extremely grateful," I said. "You've earned it," she said. "You're among the strongest students I've taught. Thoughtful, rigorous, genuinely curious about how things work. The kind of person who should be leading organizations, not just working in them." I left her office feeling electric. This was the moment that separated trajectories. Having someone powerful in your corner, someone who could make calls, who could get your application actually read instead of filtered out. I researched graduate programs obsessively, applied to 7 competitive MBA programs and public policy master's programs, all requiring multiple strong faculty recommendations. Professor Hill was my primary recommender. She'd taught me in 2 courses, knew my work thoroughly, had explicitly offered to advocate for me. I sent her my essays, my transcripts, my resume. She said she'd handle her part. Applications were due in January of my senior year. I submitted everything on time, paid the fees with money I'd saved from my internship, and waited. February passed, March came, April arrived. Rejection letters started appearing in my inbox. One program, then another, then another. All 7 rejected me. I couldn't process it. My GPA was strong. My GMAT scores were above the median for most of these programs. My essays had been reviewed by multiple people, revised extensively. My internship gave me relevant experience. Something had gone wrong. I scheduled an appointment with Professor Hill. Maybe she could help me understand what happened, what I needed to strengthen for next year's applications. She seemed surprised when I arrived. "I thought you'd decided to go straight into the workforce," she said. "No," I said. "I applied to 7 programs, all rejections." She frowned slightly. "That's unfortunate. These programs are extremely competitive. Sometimes the fit just isn't right." "Could I ask what you emphasized in your recommendation?" I said. "Maybe I need to adjust my profile somehow." "I don't discuss the content of my recommendations," she said. "But I can assure you I was completely honest about your capabilities and potential." Honest. That word lodged in my chest like something sharp. I thanked her and left. I graduated in May with my business degree, and a feeling of fundamental inadequacy I couldn't shake. 7 programs had evaluated me and decided I wasn't qualified. 7 committees of experts had reviewed my credentials and said no. Maybe Jessica Price had been right all along. Maybe I'd been lucky to get into this university, but now reality was sorting me into my proper place. I took a job at a small regional consulting firm. The work was mind-numbing, building spreadsheet models for clients who never implemented our recommendations, sitting in meetings where nothing was decided, writing reports no one read. The pay was $38,000 a year. After taxes, rent, loan payments, and sending money home, I had almost nothing left. I told myself this was temporary. I'd work for a year, save money, apply to graduate programs again. Next time would be different. But the rejection had damaged something inside me. When I sat down to work on new applications that fall, I couldn't write. Every sentence felt fraudulent. Every claim about my abilities felt like a lie that admissions committees would immediately see through. I didn't apply anywhere. A year became 2 years. 2 became 3. I changed jobs twice, moving to slightly larger firms, slightly better pay. $42,000, then $48,000. I was competent but invisible. I did the work, met deadlines, never caused problems. I was exactly what I'd been in high school, capable but unremarkable, present but unseen. My parents' situation deteriorated. My father's position at the mill was eliminated. He found work doing maintenance at a storage facility for $12 an hour. My mother's library closed due to budget cuts. She took a job as a cashier at a grocery store. I sent them more money, sometimes half my paycheck, and ate pasta and canned soup for weeks. I was 26 years old and felt like I'd already failed at life. I stopped talking to people from college. I stopped maintaining any friendships. I worked, I sent money. Home, I existed. The only thing I did for myself was read. I spent hours in public libraries. The irony wasn't lost on me. Reading about business, technology, organizational design. Not for any purpose, just to fill time, to feel like my brain wasn't completely atrophying. That's when I started noticing something. I was reading case studies about companies, about industries, and I kept seeing the same pattern. Organizations were terrible at measuring what actually mattered. They collected data obsessively but analyzed it poorly. They made decisions based on intuition dressed up as strategy. Education was especially bad at this. Schools collected enormous amounts of data about students. test scores, attendance, demographics, disciplinary records, but they had almost no ability to understand what that data actually meant, what interventions actually worked, what resources actually made a difference. I started thinking about this constantly, not because I cared about education, particularly, but because I saw a problem with a potential solution. A technical problem, a systems problem. What if someone built software that could actually analyze educational data properly, that could identify patterns, predict outcomes, help schools make better decisions? I had no idea how to build software. I'd taken one programming course in college and barely passed it, but I started teaching myself at night. Free online courses, tutorials, documentation, Python first, then SQL, then basic web development. It was slow, frustrating. I spent hours debugging code that didn't work, trying to understand concepts that seemed deliberately obscure. But something had shifted in me. For the first time since the rejections, I felt like I was building something that belonged to me, not working for someone else's goals, not following someone else's path. Mine. I was 28 when I built the first prototype. It was crude, a basic web application that could import student data, run some statistical analyses, and generate simple visualizations. Nothing impressive technically. But I showed it to a friend who worked at a local high school, and she said, "This is actually useful. We have all this data and no idea what to do with it." That was the moment I realized I might have something. I spent the next 2 years refining it, working my consulting job during the day, coding at night and on weekends. I built out more features, predictive analytics, intervention recommendations, integration with existing school systems. I taught myself data science, machine learning basics, user experience design. I showed it to more teachers, more administrators. I asked them what they needed, what frustrated them, what would actually help. I built what they told me they wanted. By the time I was 30, I had a product that actually worked. It wasn't beautiful, but it was functional. Schools could use it to identify students who were at risk of failing, to measure which teaching strategies were effective, to allocate resources more efficiently. I quit my consulting job. I had $8,000 in savings. I gave myself 6 months to get paying customers, or I'd have to go back to soul-crushing work. I called every school district within driving distance. Most didn't return my calls. Some listened politely and said they had no budget. A few said they'd think about it. One small district, 3 schools, about 1,200 students total, said yes. They'd try it for 1 year. They'd pay me $15,000. That was enough to survive on if I lived extremely cheaply. I worked with them intensively that year. I customized the software for their specific needs. I trained their staff. I sat in meetings and learned their language, their problems, their politics. The results were measurable. They identified struggling students earlier. They adjusted interventions based on actual data. Their graduation rate increased by 3.4 percentage points. Modest, but statistically significant. They renewed for another year, and they told other districts about it. By year 2, I had 4 clients. By year 3, 12. By year 4, 35. I hired my first employee when I was 32, a developer named William Rogers, who was better at coding than I'd ever be. Then a data scientist, a salesperson, a customer success manager. The company was growing, but I was barely surviving. I paid my employees real salaries, but took almost nothing for myself. I lived in a studio apartment with furniture from thrift stores. I ate cheaply, rarely went out, never took time off. But I owned something. I'd built something real. By the time I was 35, we had 180 school districts as clients across 8 states. We'd raised a small seed round from investors, $800,000 that let us hire more people, build better infrastructure, expand our sales efforts. I took a salary for the first time, $60,000 a year. It felt like luxury. By 38, we had 600 districts, 2.4 million students using our platform. We'd raised a Series A, $8 million. I owned 65% of the company. On paper, I was worth about $30 million. I didn't feel wealthy. I felt terrified. Terrified the growth would stop, that we'd make a wrong decision, that I'd lose everything I'd built. I worked constantly, 80-hour weeks. I reviewed every major decision. I talked to customers personally. I pushed my team relentlessly. I wasn't a good boss. I was demanding, impatient, sometimes cruel when people didn't meet my standards. I told myself it was necessary, that excellence required intensity. Really, I was just afraid. My parents were both gone by then. My father had died of a heart attack at 63. My mother had followed 18 months later, cancer that spread too fast for treatment to matter. I'd paid for their medical bills, their funerals, everything. But I'd barely been present, too busy building, too busy proving something to no one in particular. By 40, the company was worth $180 million. We had 1,400 districts, offices in 4 cities, 120 employees. I'd become exactly what I'd wanted, successful, independent, untouchable, and completely alone. I didn't have friends. I didn't have relationships. I had employees, clients, investors, board members, people who wanted something from me or who I paid to do work. I told myself it was fine. I'd built this. I'd proven everyone wrong who doubted me. But I hadn't proven anything to the one person who actually mattered. I'd never found out what Professor Hill had written in those recommendations. I'd spent 15 years building a company, accumulating wealth and influence, and I'd never gone back to understand what had actually happened. I'd just assumed I wasn't good enough, that the rejections were deserved, that I'd somehow tricked my way into moderate success despite my limitations. That changed on a Tuesday afternoon in October. I was in Boston for a conference. Educational technology leaders, venture capitalists, policy people. I was scheduled to give a keynote the next day about using data to improve student outcomes. I was having coffee in the hotel lobby, reviewing my presentation slides, when someone sat down across from me. "Excuse me," she said, "are you speaking tomorrow about educational analytics?" I looked up. She was probably in her early 30s, professional attire, carrying a conference badge. The name on it read, Ashley Hill, Hill. "Yes," I said, "tomorrow morning." "I'm really looking forward to it," she said. "My mother actually works in education research. She's here too. She's been following your company for a while. She thinks what you're doing is really important." Something cold moved through my chest. "Your mother," I said. "What's her name?" "Deborah Hill," she said. "She's a professor at—" "I know who she is," I said. Ashley looked surprised. "You know my mom?" "I was her student," said. "Long time ago." "Oh, that's wonderful. She'd probably love to reconnect. She's actually speaking on a panel this afternoon about teacher preparation. You should come." I told her I'd think about it. I didn't go to her panel, but I did something I'd never done before. I called the university where I'd applied to graduate programs. I asked to speak to someone in admissions. I explained that I'd applied 15 years ago, that I wanted to see my file under FERPA regulations, the law that gives you access to your educational records. It took 3 weeks, but they sent me the file, including Professor Hill's recommendation letter. I read it in my office alone, after everyone had gone home. The letter was 2 pages long, professionally written, carefully worded. It said I was a competent student, reliable, adequate analytical skills, modest potential. It said I lacked intellectual creativity, that I was better suited for implementation than strategy, that I would likely perform adequately in structured environments, but struggled with ambiguity. It recommended me with reservations. Every other recommendation in my file, from professors who'd taught me in one course, who barely knew me, was strongly positive. They called me exceptional, rigorous, promising. Professor Hill's letter was the outlier, the poison pill, and now I understood why. I had the graduate admissions office pull her son's file. His name was Dennis Hill. He'd applied to the same programs the same year I did. He'd gotten into 4 of them. She'd sabotaged me to help her son. I sat in my office until 3 in the morning, reading those letters over and over. I wasn't angry. I was something colder than anger. I'd spent 15 years believing I wasn't good enough. 15 years of self-doubt, of compensating through relentless work, of never feeling secure in my own abilities, because she'd decided her son's future mattered more than mine. I didn't do anything with the information. I filed it away. I went back to work, but something had clarified. The next year, the company grew to $420 million in valuation. We were acquisition targets for 2 major education publishers. I turned them both down. By 43, we'd gone public. The IPO valued us at $1.2 billion. My stake was worth $780 million. I was now wealthier than I'd ever imagined possible, and I still didn't care about the money. I cared about control, about building something no one could take from me, about being untouchable. 2 years after the IPO, I was invited to give a talk at a major education philanthropy event in New York. They wanted me to discuss how technology could transform educational outcomes, how data could drive equity. I accepted. The event was at a high-end hotel in Manhattan. Ballrooms, catered dinner, influential people from foundations, government agencies, university schools of education. I gave my talk. It went well. People approached me afterward with questions, with ideas for collaboration, with pitches. That's when I saw her. Professor Deborah Hill, standing near the bar, older than I remembered, but unmistakable. She was talking to someone, looking professional and confident, exactly as she'd always been. I watched her for a moment. She hadn't seen me yet. Then someone tapped my shoulder. It was Ashley Hill, the woman I'd met in Boston 2 years earlier. "I thought that was you," she said. "That was a great talk, really compelling." "Thank you," I said. "My mom is here," she said. "She'd love to say hello. She's so proud when her former students do well." Before I could respond, she was waving her mother over. Professor Hill approached, smiling, hand extended. Then she recognized me. The smile faltered for just a second, less than a second, but I saw it. "My goodness," she said, recovering smoothly. "I remember you. You were in my organizational systems course, weren't you? This is wonderful. I've been reading about your company." "Have you?" I said. "Absolutely. What you've built is remarkable. Exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need in education." Ashley was beaming. "Isn't it amazing? You taught him, and now he's changing the whole field." Professor Hill's expression was perfect, warm, collegial, appropriately impressed. "I always knew you had potential," she said. I looked at her for a long moment. "Did you?" I said. Something shifted in her eyes. Some recognition that I knew, that I'd found out. But she maintained the smile. "Well," she said, "it's lovely to see how well you've done." Ashley jumped in. "Actually, Mom's been meaning to ask you something. Dennis, my brother, he's been struggling to find the right position. He went to a great MBA program, got his degree, but the job market has been tough. He's got a family now, 2 kids, and he's been stuck in middle management at an insurance company. Mom thought maybe you might know of opportunities." I looked at Professor Hill. She had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Dennis would be so grateful," Ashley continued. "He's really smart, really hard-working. He just needs a chance." Professor Hill cleared her throat. Ashley, I don't think this is the appropriate. Actually, I said, I might have something. They both looked surprised. We're always looking for good people, I said. Have Dennis send me his resume. I'll take a look. Ashley practically glowed. Really? Oh my God, that would be amazing. Thank you so much. Professor Hill was watching me carefully now, trying to understand what I was doing. Of course, I said. Happy to help. I gave Ashley my card, told her to have Dennis reach out directly. Professor Hill said something about not wanting to impose, but Ashley was already thanking me profusely, already pulling out her phone to text her brother. 3 days later, Dennis Hill sent me his resume. It was adequate. Good MBA from a strong program, reasonable work, experience, nothing exceptional. I had my team bring him in for interviews. He was fine. Articulate, professional, smart enough. He interviewed well. My hiring managers recommended him for a senior analyst position. Decent role, $140,000 salary plus equity. I hired him, but not for the analyst position. I hired him as a special projects coordinator, reporting directly to me. $180,000 salary, better title, better benefits. I told him I saw real potential, that I wanted to invest in developing his capabilities, that I thought he could grow into something significant at the company. He was grateful, almost overwhelmed. Dennis Hill was 39 years old, married with 2 young children, living in a decent suburb, but financially stressed. The MBA loans, the mortgage, the childcare costs, it was crushing him. This job was life-changing. I assigned him to work on a project I actually cared about, developing a new teacher evaluation system. Here's what I want, I told him in our first one-on-one meeting. I want you to research and present on how great teachers shape student outcomes. Not just test scores, real outcomes, life trajectories. How much does having an exceptional teacher in a crucial year actually matter? He took it seriously, spent months researching, reading studies, talking to educators, analyzing data. 3 months later, he asked if he could present his findings to a larger group. I think this is really important, he said. I think everyone in the company should understand how much teachers matter. How large a group? I asked. Maybe a company-wide presentation, and potentially some external stakeholders, education leaders, policy people, maybe some of our foundation partners. That's ambitious, I said. I really believe in this, he said. I think we undervalue teachers systematically. I think we need to change how we think about their impact. I told him to put together a proposal. He came back with a plan for a half-day symposium. He'd present his research, we'd have panel discussions, we'd invite influential people from across the education sector. It would be prestigious, high profile, important. I think we should do it, I said, but I want you to own this, your name on it, your moment. He looked like I'd handed him something precious. We scheduled it for 6 months out. Dennis worked obsessively on his presentation. He was genuinely passionate about this, about recognizing teachers, about elevating their profession, about changing how society valued education. It was actually good work, thorough, thoughtful, well-researched. I told him he should invite important people in his life, make it a celebration of this work he'd done. Should I invite my family? He asked. Absolutely, I said. Your wife, your kids, if they can sit through it, anyone who supported you. He mentioned his mother might be interested. She was a professor of education, had always been passionate about these issues. Definitely invite her, I said. She'd probably be proud to see this. The symposium was held at a nice venue in the city, a modern conference center with good acoustics, comfortable seating, professional setup. We had about 150 attendees. Our staff, school district leaders, foundation executives, education researchers, journalists who covered education policy. Dennis's family sat in the third row. His wife, his 2 kids, who were remarkably well-behaved, and his mother. Professor Deborah Hill, looking distinguished and attentive, I gave opening remarks, welcomed everyone, explained that we were there to explore how teachers fundamentally shape lives, how their influence extends far beyond test scores and transcripts. Then I introduced Dennis. He was nervous but good. He presented his research clearly. He showed data on how a single exceptional teacher could alter a student's entire trajectory, how the right guidance at the right moment could mean the difference between giving up and persevering, how teachers who believed in students created possibility where none had existed before. He showed the inverse too, how teachers who dismissed students, who lowered expectations, who withheld support, could damage confidence that took years to rebuild. The research is unambiguous, Dennis said. Teacher belief matters. Teacher advocacy matters. When teachers invest in students, when they use their influence to open doors, outcomes change dramatically. He showed graphs, statistics, longitudinal studies. And the opposite is equally powerful, he continued. When teachers withhold support, when they prioritize other interests over student success, the damage can last decades. I watched Professor Hill from where I stood at the side of the room. She was watching her son with pride. She hadn't understood yet. Dennis moved into his final section. I want to talk about recommendations, he said. About how much power teachers and professors have in shaping student opportunities. He put up a slide showing research on graduate school admissions, on how faculty recommendations weighted heavily in decisions, on how a single negative evaluation could tank an otherwise strong application. A good recommendation can change everything, Dennis said. It can open doors that seemed closed. It can give students access to networks, to opportunities, to futures they couldn't access alone. Professor Hill was nodding slightly. And a bad recommendation, or worse, a deliberately damaging one disguised as support, can destroy years of work in a single document. The room was very quiet now. Dennis looked uncomfortable suddenly, like he was realizing something. I've spent months researching how much teachers matter, he said slowly, and what I've found is that the best teachers see potential even when students don't see it in themselves. They advocate fiercely. They use their influence to help, not to hurt. He paused. And the worst teachers prioritize their own interests over student success. They use their power to advance personal agendas. They betray trust. I saw the exact moment Professor Hill understood. Her face went pale. She looked from Dennis to me, then back to Dennis. Dennis was still talking, but he was looking at me now, confusion and something else, realization maybe, in his expression. I don't know if everyone here knows, Dennis said quietly, but our CEO, the person who built this company, who created this platform that serves millions of students, he was told he wasn't good enough for graduate school. He was told he had modest potential, that he lacked creativity, that he was better suited for implementation than strategy. The room was absolutely silent. Someone wrote that in a recommendation letter, Dennis continued. Someone who had the power to help, who had promised to help, who then chose to hurt instead. He looked at his mother directly. And that person was wrong, he said. Catastrophically wrong, because look what he built anyway. Look what he accomplished despite being told he wasn't capable. Professor Hill stood up abruptly. She grabbed her purse. Dennis, we need to leave, she said sharply, and Mom, now. I'm not finished presenting. You've been used, she said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. This whole thing was designed to humiliate me. Can't you see that? Dennis looked stricken. What are you talking about? Ask him, she said, pointing at me. Ask him why he really hired you. Ask him what this presentation was actually about. People were staring now, the whole room watching this unfold. Dennis looked at me. Is that true? I didn't say anything. You need to leave with me right now, Professor Hill said to Dennis. We're done here. No, Dennis said quietly. I'm not leaving. I worked hard on this. This research matters. You're being manipulated. Maybe, Dennis said. Or maybe I've spent 3 months learning about something important, and you're uncomfortable because it applies to you. Professor Hill's face flushed red. How dare you? Did you write that recommendation? Dennis asked. Did you sabotage someone to help me? She didn't answer. Oh my God, Dennis said. You did. I did what any mother would do, she said. I gave my son a chance. By destroying someone else's chance? He did fine, she snapped. Obviously he did fine. Look at him. He doesn't need my apology. Mom, that's not... You're ungrateful, she said. Her voice was shaking now. Everything I did for you, the sacrifices I made, and now you're standing there judging me? She turned and screamed at Dennis one more time. You've ruined everything. Everything I built. Everything I worked for. You've destroyed it. Then she stormed out of the symposium, shoulders rigid, face burning with rage and shame. The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Dennis stood at the podium looking absolutely devastated. Finally, I walked to the front. Let's take a 15-minute break, I said calmly. Dennis, excellent presentation, really important work. We'll resume with the panel discussion after the break. People started moving, talking in low voices. Dennis stepped off the stage, looking like something inside him had shattered. I didn't approach him. I let him have space. His wife went to him, put her hand on his arm. He shook his head, said something I couldn't hear, then walked outside. During the break, I stood in the hallway, appearing unconcerned, checking messages on my phone. Dennis came back in after 10 minutes. He found me. Did you hire me just for this? He asked. No, I said, and it was true. I hired you because you're competent and because I could. The presentation was your idea. But you knew this would happen. I knew she might be uncomfortable with certain truths. I didn't know she'd react that way. You used me. I gave you a job. Said. A good job. I gave you a project you cared about. I gave you a platform to share research you believe in. If that had consequences for someone else, that's not about you. He studied me. Do you feel better now? Did this fix anything? No, I said honestly. Nothing's fixed. Then why? I didn't answer. Dennis shook his head slowly. I don't know if I can keep working for you. That's your choice, I said. But the job is still yours if you want it. The work you did is genuinely valuable. I wasn't lying about that. He went back inside without responding. The symposium continued. The panel discussion happened. People networked afterward. It was professionally successful. Dennis stayed at the company. We didn't talk about what happened for 3 weeks. Then he asked for a meeting. I've been thinking about this constantly, he said, and I've realized something. You didn't just want to hurt my mother. You wanted me to see who she actually is. I didn't confirm or deny. I called the admissions offices, he said. I got copies of her recommendations for me, for my graduate applications. He put a folder on my desk. They're extraordinary, he said, glowing. She said I was among the most brilliant students she'd ever taught. She said I had exceptional strategic thinking, creativity, leadership potential. He paused. I'm good at my job, he said. But I'm not exceptional. I'm not brilliant. I'm competent, hardworking. But she oversold me massively. And yet you got in, I said, because she had influence, because her reputation meant something, because she was willing to exaggerate for me. Yes. And she was willing to damage you for me. Yes. Dennis sat back. I've been living my whole life thinking I earned everything, that I was just naturally talented, but I had an advantage I didn't know about. An advocate who was willing to cheat. She's your mother, I said. She wanted to help you. At someone else's expense. That's often how advantage works. He looked at me for a long time. I want to keep working here, but I want to earn it. Can you give me an actual performance review? Tell me honestly what you think of my work. I did. He was good, not exceptional, but genuinely good. Thorough, reliable, thoughtful. Exactly what I'd told Professor Hill he was 15 years ago. Dennis and I developed something unexpected over the following months. Not quite friendship, the context was too complicated for that, but something like mutual respect. He worked harder than anyone else on my team, not because he had to prove himself to me, but because he needed to prove something to himself. We started having lunch occasionally, just the two of us, away from the office, talking about things that weren't work, his kids, his marriage, the weird position he found himself in, working for the man his mother had tried to destroy. "She hasn't called me," he said one day, about 2 months after the symposium. "Not once. Ashley talks to her, but she won't talk to me." "Does that bother you?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "And also no, I keep thinking about what she said, that I ruined everything, like her reputation, her pride, that mattered more than what she'd actually done." He picked at his food. "I asked Ashley to tell her I wanted to talk. She said Mom wasn't ready." "Maybe she won't ever be ready," I said. "Maybe." We sat in silence for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" Dennis said. "When you found out what she did, when you saw that recommendation letter, what did you feel?" I thought about it. Relief. Relief? I'd spent 15 years thinking I wasn't good enough, I said. That every success I had was luck or accident. Finding out it wasn't my inadequacy, it was her sabotage, that gave me something external to blame. It was almost comforting. And now I know the truth, and it doesn't change anything. I'm still the person who doesn't trust easily. Still the person who works 80 hours a week to feel secure. Still the person who built all of this because I needed to prove something. Dennis nodded slowly. I keep thinking about what I said in that presentation, about how teachers can damage students for decades. I was talking about you, but I was also talking about me. How so? She made me believe I was special, he said. Exceptional. And I built my entire self-image around that. When I couldn't get jobs as good as I thought I deserved, when I ended up in middle management at an insurance company, I thought the world was wrong. I thought I was being overlooked. He laughed bitterly, but I wasn't being overlooked. I was being evaluated accurately, and that's hard to accept. You're good at what you do here, I said. I know, but I'm not the person she told me I was, and that's a weird kind of grief. Over the next year, Dennis became one of the people I trusted most, not because of guilt or obligation, but because he approached everything with brutal honesty after that symposium. He knew he'd been given advantages. He knew his mother had cheated for him, and he worked to deserve his position retroactively. We became something like friends. I'd never really had a friend before, not since college, not in any meaningful way. My life had been work, only work, building and defending and proving. Dennis was different. He knew my worst story, he knew what his mother had done, and he didn't try to justify it or minimize it. He just acknowledged it and sat with the discomfort. We had dinner sometimes, went to basketball games occasionally, met each other's, his family. I didn't have family, but I met his wife, Valerie, and his kids. They were good kids, smart, curious, kind. I wondered sometimes what my life would have been like if I'd had what Dennis had. Not the advantages from his mother, but the normal things. A partner, children, a life outside of work. But I'd traded all of that for this, for the company, for being untouchable. 2 years after the symposium, Dennis came to my office looking troubled. "My mother called," he said. I waited. "She wants to meet. Says she has something she needs to say." "To you?" "To both of us." I raised an eyebrow. "She asked if I could arrange it," Dennis said. "A conversation, the three of us." "What did you tell her?" "I told her I'd ask you, but honestly, I'm not sure it's a good idea." "Why not?" "Because I don't think she's ready to actually apologize. I think she wants to explain, to justify, and I don't think you need to hear that. What do you need? I asked. Dennis sat down heavily. I need to understand why she did it. Not the obvious reason, that she wanted to help me, but why she thought destroying someone else was acceptable. Why she thought that was motherly love instead of corruption. You think meeting with her will give you that understanding? Probably not, but I feel like I have to try. I considered it. I imagined that meeting. Professor Deborah Hill, now in her late 60s, sitting across from me, trying to explain her choices, trying to make me understand. Part of me wanted to hear it, wanted to watch her squirm, wanted to see if she'd actually apologize or if she'd just make excuses. But another part of me, the part that had spent 2 years building something like normalcy with her son, didn't want to give her that access. Didn't want to let her back into my life, even for an hour. Tell her I'll think about it, I said. Dennis nodded and left. I didn't think about it. I already knew my answer. 3 days later, I told Dennis no. He didn't seem surprised. Can I ask why? Because nothing she says will change what happened, and nothing I say will make her understand what she did. We'll sit in a room, she'll explain her reasoning, I'll either accept it or reject it, and we'll all leave feeling worse. She won't accept that. Answer. She doesn't have to accept it. Dennis ran his hand through his hair. I'm going to meet with her anyway, without you. I need to have this conversation. You should, I said. She's your mother. Will that change things between us? No. He did meet with her. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon. He told me about it the following Monday. She cried, he said, a lot. She said she'd made a terrible mistake, that she'd been thinking about it for years, that she didn't know how to fix it. Did she say why she did it? She said she was afraid for me, that I was good but not exceptional, and she knew the competition was brutal. She said she thought if she could just get me into the right program, I'd have a chance. And she said you seemed capable enough that you'd be fine either way. Capable enough, I repeated. Yeah, that's what she said. That you were obviously smart, obviously going to succeed at something, so maybe this one opportunity didn't matter as much for you as it did for me. What did you say? I told her that was a rationalization, that she'd made a choice to benefit me at someone else's expense, and she couldn't predict outcomes. She couldn't know you'd be fine. She gambled with your future to secure mine. How did she respond? She said she'd do it again, that I'm her son and she'd make the same choice every time. I absorbed that. It wasn't surprising, but hearing it confirmed was clarifying. She asked again if you'd meet with her, Dennis said. She said she needs to apologize directly, that she can't move forward without that. Her ability to move forward isn't my responsibility. I know. That's what I told her. Dennis looked exhausted. She said something else, though. She said watching me work for you, watching us become friends, it's killing her. She said it feels like I've chosen you over her. Have you? I don't know. Maybe. Not because I like you better or because I don't love her, but because being around you forces me to be honest. You don't let me pretend I earned things I didn't earn. You don't let me hide behind advantages I didn't acknowledge. He smiled sadly. She let me believe a lie about myself my whole life. You made me face the truth, and the truth is harder, but it's better. We sat with that for a moment. She wants me to quit, Dennis said, to stop working for you. She says it's humiliating, that people talk about it, that it makes her look terrible. Do you want to quit? No. This is the first place I've ever worked where I actually feel like I'm earning what I'm getting, where my success or failure is based on what I actually do, not on who my mother knows or what strings she can pull. Then stay. She said if I stay, she can't have a relationship with me, that it's too painful, that I'm forcing her to choose between her pride and her son. I waited. I told her that's her choice to make, Dennis said quietly. Not mine. Professor Hill stopped calling after that. Dennis told me she'd withdrawn from both him and Ashley. She'd retired from teaching earlier than planned. She'd moved to a different state, Florida, somewhere warm and far from her previous life. Ashley kept in touch with her, but even that relationship was strained. She told Dennis their mother was bitter, isolated, convinced she was the victim of an elaborate revenge plot. In a way, she was right, but also completely wrong. I hadn't planned any of this. I'd simply responded to opportunities as they arose. Hired Dennis because I could, given him meaningful work because he was capable, let him discover the truth because he deserved to know. The symposium wasn't revenge, it was just information. Facts presented clearly, thoroughly, without editorial comment. The fact that those facts destroyed Professor Hill's relationship with her son, that was her doing, not mine. But I knew she'd never see it that way. 4 years after the symposium, Dennis came to my office with news. My mother had a stroke, he said. She's alive, but it's bad. Left side paralysis, speech difficulties. I'm sorry. Ashley's with her in Florida. She wants me to come. You should go. I know. I'm flying out tomorrow. He hesitated. She's been asking for me. Ashley says she's been trying to say something, but they can't understand her. He left the next morning. He was gone for 2 weeks. When he came back, he looked older, worn down. How is she? I asked. Dying, he said. Not immediately, but soon. The stroke damaged too much. She's got maybe 6 months, maybe a year. I'm sorry, I said again. She kept trying to talk to me, Dennis said. The speech therapist couldn't figure out what she was saying, but I could. After a few days, I understood. He sat down heavily. She was trying to say, I ruined everything, Dennis said. Over and over, I ruined everything. I didn't respond. I told her it was okay, that I forgave her, that we were okay. Did she understand? I think so. She cried. She kept crying. Dennis looked at me directly. She asked about you. I could see it in her eyes, the question. She wanted to know if you'd forgive her too. What did you tell her? I told her that wasn't my question to answer, that she'd have to ask you herself. She can't ask me herself. She can barely speak. I know, that's the point. We sat in silence. Is that cruel? Dennis asked. To know she's dying and still not give her the absolution she wants? I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe, but I don't owe her my forgiveness just because she's dying. Death doesn't erase what she did. No, Dennis agreed. It doesn't. Dennis went back to Florida twice more over the next few months. Each time he came back, he looked more tired, more sad. She's deteriorating, he said after the last visit. Barely conscious most of the time. Ashley's handling everything. Do you need time off? No, work is the only thing keeping me sane right now. Professor Deborah Hill died 7 months after her stroke. It was a Saturday morning in March. Dennis called me from the hospital. She's gone, he said. Just stopped breathing. I'm sorry. Ashley was with her. I was in the cafeteria getting coffee. I missed it by 10 minutes. His voice cracked slightly. Maybe that's better, he said. I don't know if I could have watched. I flew to Florida for the funeral, not because I felt I owed her anything, but because Dennis had become my friend, and friends show up. The service was small. Ashley and her husband, Dennis and his wife and kids, a few former colleagues from the university, a couple of distant relatives. No one from the education world she'd been so prominent in. No former students coming to pay respects. Just a small, sad gathering of people who felt obligated to be there. The minister gave a generic eulogy about dedication to education, about being a devoted mother. Nobody mentioned the symposium. Nobody mentioned what had driven her into isolation and bitterness. I sat in the back, I didn't speak. I didn't approach the casket during the viewing. After the service, Ashley came up to me. "Thank you for coming," she said. "It means a lot to Dennis. To me, too." "Of course." "She talked about you toward the end," Ashley said, when she could still speak a little. "She said she'd destroyed 2 lives, yours and hers." "She didn't destroy mine." "No, you built something incredible despite her. But she destroyed her own life, didn't she? Trying to give Dennis an advantage, she lost him instead. She lost everything that mattered." I didn't know what to say to that. "I found something," Ashley said, when we were cleaning out her apartment. "A letter she'd written, addressed to you." She handed me an envelope. "She never sent it. I don't know if she meant to, but I thought you should have it." I took the envelope. My name was written on the front in shaky handwriting. I didn't open it at the funeral. I put it in my jacket pocket and forgot about it until I was on the plane home. Then I opened it. The letter was 4 pages long, handwritten, difficult to read in places where her hand had shaken. She started by acknowledging what she'd done. No excuses, no justifications, just a clear statement. She had sabotaged my graduate school applications to benefit her son. She wrote about the years after, how she'd watched my career from a distance, how she'd felt vindicated at first when I struggled in consulting, convinced she'd been right about my limitations, then how she'd felt when my company started growing, when it became successful, when it became undeniable that I'd been exactly what I'd claimed to be, capable, strategic, creative. She wrote about the symposium, how humiliating it had been, but also how deserved. How she'd gone home that night and looked at herself honestly for the first time in decades. She wrote about losing Dennis, how he'd chosen integrity over family loyalty, and how that was her fault. How she'd taught him to value honesty through her own dishonesty, shown him what not to be by being it. She wrote about moving to Florida, about trying to rebuild her life but finding she had nothing to rebuild toward. No relationships, no purpose, no redemption arc that would make sense of what she'd done. And then she wrote about regret, real regret. Not the performative kind, not the "I'm sorry if you were hurt" non-apology, but genuine, devastating regret. She wrote, "I destroyed your faith in your own abilities because I couldn't accept my son's limitations. I stole years of your life, years you spent doubting yourself, believing you weren't good enough, because I wanted to give my son an advantage he hadn't earned. There is no justification for that. There is no excuse. It was evil masquerading as motherly love." She wrote, "I know you'll never forgive me. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I'm not asking for it. I'm just asking that you know this. You were right about yourself. You always were. I was the one who was wrong. Catastrophically, irreversibly wrong. And I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry." The letter ended there. No plea for reconciliation. No request to meet. Just the apology and silence. I read it 3 times on that flight. Then I folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. I keep it in my desk drawer. I don't look at it often, but I know it's there. That was 8 years ago. Dennis still works for me. He's my chief operating officer now, running day-to-day operations while I focus on strategy and growth. He's excellent at it. Not because of his mother's recommendations or her connections, but because he's spent a decade earning the role. We're still friends, real friends, I think, though I'm not entirely sure I know what that means. We have dinner with his family regularly. I'm godfather to his youngest daughter. When I travel for work, I bring his kids back ridiculous souvenirs. It's the closest thing I have to a family. The company is worth $6.8 billion now. We serve 18 million students across 47 states. We've expanded internationally. We've changed how education works in measurable, meaningful ways. I'm 58 years old and wealthier than I ever imagined possible. And I'm still alone. I live in a beautiful house I barely spend time in. I work 70 hours a week, down from 80 because Dennis insists I need to take better care of myself. I date occasionally, but nothing sticks. I can't build intimacy, I can't trust enough. Professor Hill's letter sits in my desk drawer, and sometimes I wonder if she was right. If she destroyed 2 lives, mine by sabotaging me, and hers by losing everything that mattered. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her to acknowledge what she'd done, but I have it anyway. The knowledge that she understood, at the end, that she saw clearly what she'd cost me, what she'd cost herself, what she'd cost her son. Dennis asked me once if I'd forgiven her. I don't know, I said. I don't think about forgiveness. I think about what happened, and I think about what I built anyway. That's not the same thing. No, it's not. Do you wish you could forgive her? I thought about that for a long time. I wish I could be the kind of person who forgives easily, I said. But I'm not. I'm the person she made me. Someone who doesn't trust, who doesn't forget, who builds walls instead of bridges. You built a bridge to me, Dennis said. That's different. You didn't do anything to me. You were just caught in the middle. So was she, in a way. Caught between being a mother and being ethical. She chose wrong. Yeah, she did. We sat with that. I miss her, Dennis said quietly. Which is strange, because I only really knew her for the first 39 years of my life. After the symposium, after she withdrew, that wasn't really her anymore. That was someone I didn't recognize. Maybe that was her, I said. Maybe the person you knew before was the mask, and the bitter, isolated woman was who she actually was. I don't believe that. I think she was both. The good professor who helped students, and the corrupt mother who cheated for her son. People contain multitudes. Very poetic. It's from a poem, Walt Whitman. I know, I'm just giving you shit. He smiled. Then the smile faded. Do you think you'll ever move past this? He asked. Ever build something that isn't about proving her wrong? I don't know. Maybe when I die, someone will go through my things and find her letter and realize I kept it. Maybe that will mean something. Or maybe it means you're still trapped. Maybe both are true. I'm 63 now. I stepped down as CEO last year. Dennis runs the company. I'm chairman of the board, still involved in major decisions but not grinding through 80-hour weeks anymore. I'm trying to learn how to live without work being the center of everything. It's hard. I took up woodworking. I read more. I travel to places that aren't just conferences and board meetings. I'm trying to build something that looks like a life. But I'm still the person Professor Deborah Hill made me. Still the person who was told he wasn't good enough and spent 40 years proving otherwise. Her letter is still in my desk drawer. I read it sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep. I understand what she was trying to do. I understand the impulse to protect your child, to give them every advantage, to clear obstacles from their path. But understanding isn't forgiveness. She made a choice that shaped my entire life. She taught me that people who promise to help might actually hurt you, that authority figures can betray you, that you can't trust anyone to advocate for you except yourself. Those lessons served me well in building a business. They made me sharp, defensive, strategic, but they made me terrible at being human. Dennis tells me I should go to therapy. He's been going for years, working through the complicated legacy of being the son his mother cheated for, of building a friendship with the man she tried to destroy. Maybe he's right. Maybe there's still time to become someone different. Or maybe this is just who I am now. The man who won, who built something undeniable, who proved everyone wrong. The man who carries a dead woman's apology in his desk drawer and doesn't know what to do with it. Dennis asked me last week what I want my legacy to be. The company, I said automatically. No, he said, not what you've built. What you want people to remember about you. I didn't have an answer. Because the truth is, I don't know what I want people to remember. I don't know what I want my life to have meant beyond the metrics and the valuations and the number of students we've served. I won. I proved I was capable. I built something that will outlast me. But Professor Hill was right about one thing. I destroyed my life too, just in a different way. She destroyed hers through corruption and pride. I destroyed mine through vindication and isolation. We're both gone now, in our different ways. She's literally dead, buried in a cemetery in Florida that no one visits except Dennis on Mother's Day. And I'm functionally dead, alive but not living, successful but not fulfilled, wealthy but not rich in anything that actually matters. I won, but I don't know what I won. Maybe that's the real cost of what she did. Not that she tried to stop me, but that she turned my entire life into a response to her. Every decision I made was about proving her wrong, building something she couldn't diminish, becoming someone who didn't need her approval. And in doing that, I never figured out who I actually was underneath the armor. Dennis is living the life I should have lived. Family, purpose, work, that matters but doesn't consume everything. He's at peace with his limitations and proud of his actual accomplishments. I'm still fighting a ghost, still proving I was good enough to a woman who's been dead for 8 years, still unable to put down the weapons I built to defend myself. Her letter is in my desk drawer, and I'm still deciding whether reading it one more time will help me finally let go, or just remind me that some wounds never heal. They just get folded into who you become. I won, but it changed me permanently, and I don't know if that's victory or just a different kind of defeat. Stories like this happen more often than we think. Subscribe if you want to hear the ones that usually stay unspoken. And if this story made you pause, a like helps the channel grow.